Welcome back, America, to Duty Honor Real Estate. This is our 16th episode, and we have an incredible guest, Tristan Calabro. Tristan, thank you so much for coming on. I'm so excited to get into your story, and I think it starts from jumping out of planes.
That's right, man. Yeah, it's a lifetime ago, but yep, that's where it started.
Oh, man. So what, did you just, wake up one morning and was like, oh, I'm just going to jump on a plane?
No, so actually what's crazy is I had never been on a plane before. I'm from Nebraska. So never been around an ocean, never gone outside of my little bubble. And I was trying to get into the Marines for the longest time. Went through med waivers, the whole thing, because I had a shoulder surgery from high school. Anyways, long story short, they denied me after about a year, and so I was frustrated. I went next door to the Army, and they took me in 2 weeks. So no, I went in as just a plain infantryman, and then throughout that boot camp experience, the guys that had higher PFD scores, there's like 5 or 6 of us, they pulled into an office and they offered us a Ranger contract. And I didn't know what that was really, because I didn't really do any studying about the Army rather. And so they explained it, and I was like, yeah, no, that doesn't sound like, I don't want to go through another harder boot camp and do all that. And so they're like, hey, why don't you do airborne school? The next group down, they offered us airborne school with all the guys that said no to Ranger. So I took it. And yeah, that was kind of it. So my first time on an airplane was going to boot camp, and my second time was jumping out of it. So it was pretty crazy. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on that. I don't think people could ever just show up and jump out of a plane. So that definitely speaks to your resiliency. But it looks like your resiliency keeps going in your servitude too. So in your military career, what made you transition to firefighting?
So that's a good question. I think, a lot of vets, I'm sure you can attest to this too. You get out of the military and that was your whole identity. You've been built up to be this person through the Army and or the Marines, Air Force, whatever. You have this very specific duty and responsibility. And when you get out, we all know the transition out of the military is not like the transition into the military. They give you a week, 2 weeks, whatever, for a TAPS class, whatever, and then you're off. And so I, like a lot of guys, got out, and I felt like I didn't have a sense of purpose anymore. So I went through a bunch of different careers. I was a brig guard for a while, or brig. My wife was a brig guard in the Marines, so I'm used to saying brig. But I was a corrections officer for the Nebraska State Penitentiary for a while, and I knew really quickly that wasn't what I wanted to do, but I wanted to serve the community somehow. Eventually, about a year and a half later, my wife was now enlisted, and she got stationed in California. So that's where I fell into firefighting. So I started my firefighting career as a wildland guy. So I did a couple years, if you remember those big fires like the Paris fire, the Paradise fire up in Malibu. So that was my last fire up there. Then when my wife was transitioning out of the military, I ended up finding Pueblo, Colorado as a full-time department. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, there's so many things in there. One of the things that we love about this show are these lessons we learn, through transition, especially when we're departing the military. And thanks for bringing that up. Homeless veteran was definitely how I felt when I got out of the military. I remember my wife would tell me, like, you need to get out of bed and figure out your life.
Yep.
And it's tough. It's kind of like, is this where I wanted to be, and this is where I'm going? But it seems like Firefighter really helped you transition into, Pueblo, Colorado, and eventually, I think really forming that community mission that you do in real estate and in the community. So a little bit about let's get a little bit into it, because I think you spent some time in a fire science and firefighting shaped. How has it shaped your approach in community building?
Yeah, so it was kind of interesting. So it depends. Different cities and different states have different requirements to become a fireman. For example, in California, there was this really cool option that worked great for like families or working individuals, where instead of doing a normal traditional, academy where you're gone for 3 months, 6 months, whatever, you do it in segments through the fire program at the college. So it was really cool. So it's all the exact same stuff. It's just, you can take just, the like the wildland portion. You can do that by itself, and then you can do the structure fire stuff by itself, and it breaks it down over the course of a curriculum. So you do all the same thing, bunker drills, driving the fire trucks, spraying water, all those things, but it's more manageable if you have family. And so that was super important for me because I had, my son was just born, my wife was a Marine, and, obviously in the military, you can get called away at any time. So that was really helpful for me. So in terms of how that related to like community building, it was just an interesting take on it because it was just a modification that allowed guys to do things a little bit differently, I guess, if that makes sense.
No, without a doubt, because I think it sparked your interest into real estate, right? Because you're with the community, you're putting out fires in houses, and then now you're selling houses, right? So
exactly,
I imagine there had to be some genesis there when you're helping out in the public.
Yeah, no, 100%. And, we'll talk maybe a little bit later on about the actual transition from firefighting to real estate, but absolutely, it's just a different way to serve the community, and at the end of the day, for me, service is a big thing. How that service looks has changed over time. It started with the military, then it transitioned to firefighting, and now it's real estate, but it's all the same basic components, helping people out that need that help and they need somebody to represent them fairly and do all those types of things.
No, I love it. It's very mission oriented, and at the end of the day, we're dealing with people.
Yeah.
And so that's great to hear. So then, were you just on a fire mission and you're like, you know what? I need to get my license. Like, where did that episode happen?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I had never thought about real estate. It wasn't even something remotely on my radar. Quite honest with you, like, of course I knew about real estate agents, but it was like so far removed from me. But what happened was I was in the fire department, and I had a buddy that was a Marine, and he ended up, ironically, we worked together in California, and then he ended up being here in the real estate industry, and he turned one of his houses into a rental. And at the time, I was living in Pueblo. And we were getting ready to move up to the Springs. And I was like, man, I should just do the same thing. But I had no idea how to start. So he kind of helped me, guide me in that direction. And that's what really started my, I guess, journey into real estate. I had done, fix and flips and things like that, but not seriously. It was like one or two one-offs throughout the years. But what really kind of changed and made me push towards real estate is because I'm a big believer. I think Warren Buffett was the one that talked about having the multiple streams of income, right? So if something happens to your one stream, you've got another way to support your family. So I always wanted to have something kind of on the back burner just in case I got hurt with firefighting or whatever. What really threw it into high gear, though, was COVID. So I was obviously a fireman during COVID, and originally kind of my backup, or what I was really interested in, was being a PA, a physician assistant. So I was going to college for that. I was doing all the, undergrad med stuff, doing really well. I had a 3.8 GPA and it was awesome. But then COVID hit and everything shifted. The mandates came out, the masks, the vaccines, nobody knew what was going on. There was rules in place, all this stuff. And where it really shifted for me from going from firefighting to real estate is the fire department. There's a lot of great people that work there, but they're just like every organization. There's people that you might not want to be around as much. Okay. And where it really started to shift for me was when I had the chief of the department. We're talking like chief came up to my partner and I after a call. We just got back from a call. We've been running and gunning, COVID calls for the past 2 years. But the vaccines were starting to get really pushed. And, whether you choose to do it, don't choose to do it, whatever. For me personally, even if I wanted to, I wouldn't have been able to because of some health issues. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting in there, and she had asked me, why haven't you gotten this vaccine yet? And I said, well, some health issues, it's just not right for my family and I. And I'll never forget, she said, she insinuated that we were not good parents because of it. And she said, hey, I can't believe you would risk bringing this home to your kids, potentially get your kids sick and cause issues. And that's where it really clicked for me. At the end of the day, I loved being a fireman and I loved helping people, but there's always the politics behind it. There's always the bureaucracy in it. And that was my big push for, okay, I need to push and find something as an out just in case, being threatened to be fired all the time because of the vaccines and stuff like that. So that's what really pushed me towards the real estate industry in the beginning. And from there, it just blossomed. I helped a Marine sell her house, and I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I was like brand new. My mentors were terrible. And, I got in there and I got this listing. The lady was awesome. We bonded over the military. And her house is vacant, and I'll never forget it because it was down in Canyon City. It was my first ever sale. I'm like, okay, well, I know I'm supposed to clean this house. Like, I don't know what that means, but I'm supposed to clean it. So I told my wife, I'm like, hey, let's go to the store and get some cleaning stuff. Let's go clean this house. And so my wife and I and my two kids, like, we brought the kids some toys to entertain them, and we went to this house in horse country, Canyon City, and hands and knees scrubbed everything of this house in preparation for the pictures. And that was my first entrance into real estate.
Oh, man, I love that. I hope you guys are taking notes here. This is a case study. This is a true story right here. It's awesome because, the first really experience is your battle buddy. Your battle buddy was a Marine, and he was getting into real estate here. So that's always like a reassuring. Oh, if he can do it, I can do it,
Yeah.
And that's really cool to see because I really pride myself on creating that camaraderie outside of the military or whatever service that you're in. That, hey, you too can transition to a firefighter or a real estate or, whatever the case is. It's good to see those examples living. So I love to hear that. Another thing you talked about is kind of like layering or just mitigating your risk, right? And having multiple streams of income. And I would say nowadays more than ever, having additional income at any time is amazing. I don't care what you do. I mean, things aren't cheap. And thank you for disclosing and talking about that period during COVID. It's very sensitive and unfortunately a lot of different people reacted differently, both physically and emotionally to what was going on in that time. And so, and it's unfortunate that, there was, you could say, an assault on your character. And again, one of the biggest things I always tell people is adversity reveals character. Mm-hmm. And so that was good on your part because, you were obviously attacked, your character wise, but you're like, you know what, this, I'm going to draw a line in the sand.
Exactly.
I'm going to go and, be my own businessman, focus on my own clientele, my own future, and not really be threatened anymore from things you can't control.
Right.
And so that's a huge testimony. So I really appreciate you talking about that. And, there's politics and that's what's awesome about real estate is like, or just anything in starting your own business. It's where you really have the autonomy to go out and change people's lives. Mm-hmm. It's funny because, within the passion, passion is really what people, what you like to do, but purpose is when you change people's lives. 100%. And so all the experiences you had from paratrooper, firefighter, ambitions to be a PA, all the way to becoming a real estate agent, and that's why you're so successful with that. So let's get into that real estate journey that you're on, that you've been doing. Yeah. I think you were like a TV star or something on American Dream. Are you on HGTV? Are you on Selling Sunset?
Yeah, no, definitely nothing like that. So I had done a few TV things prior to with real estate. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the TV show. It's called Live Rescue. So it's kind of like Cops, but for firemen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was on that for a whole season down when I was with Pueblo Fire, just because the unit I was on, we got so many calls. So we were on every live night and then all the recorded stuff too. And then actually also with firefighting back when I was on that Fire in Paradise, they called our crew back to do a TV show appearance for a Jennifer Aniston TV show. And Reese Witherspoon. So I kind of had some experience with it before. And I got a call one day and it was from these guys and they're like, hey, we think you'd be great for this opportunity to represent really Broward County, but Broward and Palm Beach County in Southeast Florida. on this TV show. And so I met with him. We talked about it a while, and then I went and I ran with it. So
wow, look at you, look at that, man, superstar over here, the Italian stallion they called him. No, that's awesome. I imagine it helps you with just, I believe in improv. I believe in understanding how to communicate in unscheduled events, right?
Yeah.
When you're meeting clients and stuff. So I bet you it gave you a lot of confidence too, being on stage.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I'm the kind of person that, and I've always been this way. Like I'm very real. Like what you see is what you get. I'm the same way with my clients, with agents, with friends. I don't sugarcoat things, and it allows it. I don't need prep time, to study and do everything, because I just answer based on the way I feel and the way things are. So it did definitely help with certain things, like you have all the lights and, getting rigged up and all that stuff. And it's a little weird. You've got a guy with a camera like 2 inches from your face, and you're supposed to be saving somebody's life or doing whatever. So that was kind of trippy to get used to. But as far as the American Dream stuff, no, that was amazing, because I'm first generation American. So my dad immigrated here from Sicily, small town. And the majority of my family went back after just a couple years in the U.S., but my dad stayed. And because of that, we're really connected with our Italian roots. And Southeast Florida, if you're not aware, is a hub for Italian organizations, Italian business owners. I mean, it's incredible. And I knew when I did the American Dream, there's like 40 million viewers per month or something like that between the different mediums. And I was like, okay, I could use this for my real estate business, of course, because it is a real estate show, but it's also to highlight the lifestyle of the area that you're representing, right? And I thought, well, what a better way to showcase kind of where I come from and our culture as Italians than to go and highlight these incredible business owners that are right in the community. And so that's what I did, and it allowed me to connect with a lot of really cool people. Some luxury home builders, business owners of different restaurants and all these things. And that was awesome. Of course, it had a benefit to my business, but more importantly, it had a benefit to the community, and it was a deeper level, kind of going back to that community service. It was just a much deeper way to help the community, especially a community that's really near and dear to my heart.
No, I love it. I love how you took that acting career and obviously give back to the community. So that's incredible. It's almost like a byproduct. It's exponential. Mm-hmm. Now, you talked about, your communication style, very natural, very, you're going to tell it like it is. In this day and age, the market's wild, right? Yeah. And, buying a home or buying an investment property, what advice do you give clients, in terms of investing in their primary residence or even buying investment properties in real estate? What's natural coming to you?
So I love that question, and I love it because, nowadays with, you brought up like Selling Sunset earlier as a joke, but it's serious because there's so many agents that see these TV shows, especially like I was in South Florida. I mean, you're outside of Miami, we have more licensed agents in the state of Florida than any other state, you know what I mean? It's huge. I mean, we're like 150,000 more than California or something like that. And all these agents, they get into to the industry, they don't know what the hell they're doing, quite frankly, and they just think that they're just going to go sell $1 million houses and have these incredible clients make millions of dollars. And the truth of it is there's a big difference, and I know you know this, between real estate professionals and, I don't want to say part-timers because there's some good part-time agents, but I'm saying part-time in the sense that like they don't study the market. They don't know how to properly advise a buyer or a seller, because it's not a blanket one-size-fits-all. I mean, going back to the example I just gave, so we're here in Colorado Springs. We have a lot of military. We've got a lot of working-class families. Most of the people here are financing close to, if not 100% of their purchase. So the market fluctuations are going to affect somebody here a lot more than, say, West Palm Beach, where last year 49.2% of every single family home buyer was all cash. Wow. Right? So those guys aren't going to be as affected by a higher interest rate. So that conversation is different. And then the same thing on the sales side. If somebody wants to sell their house, what do their margins look like? Where do they want to go? do they have the means to sell this property to upgrade or downgrade or fill that gap or whatever it is? Each client is different, and so you really have to break down, hey, what are you trying to do, Mr. Seller, Mr. Buyer, and then facilitate an honest answer to that. And what's crazy is that sometimes that answer is, hey, don't sell right now, don't buy right now. Most agents don't think like that because they just see the dollar signs. They want to get paid, and so they'll try and twist it. They'll do scripts and whatever, and like with me and my team, I have a team. There's 9 of us now, and one thing that's super different about us is we don't do scripts. And people look at us like we're crazy, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, how can you not do scripts?" And I always say the same thing: your knowledge is your script, right? If you want to be the number one agent in Colorado Springs in a certain neighborhood, or you want to be the number one agent in the Royal Palm Yacht Club in Boca, then you need to know not how to convince somebody to stay at the table when they say they want to go talk to their wife, or, hey, I just want a couple days to think about it, right? You shouldn't, in my opinion, you shouldn't be sitting there thinking, okay, so they said this, and my coach told me if they say this and I have to respond with this, boom, hit them, right? Because I come from firefighting, I come from a military background. I'm not there to be the car salesman. I'm there to be a professional and offer legitimate business advice to these guys, especially a lot of these clients that we have are business owners. This directly affects their business, or on the flip side, they're first-time home buyers or whatever. This is a huge thing for them. So I always say your knowledge is your script. And so if you want to be the number one agent in Royal Palm Yacht Club, then you need to know how many houses are for sale, what the average price point is, what the days on market are, what the buyer fears are in that area, all of those types of things. And that's how you properly advise a client. You don't sit there and rehearse scripts, in my opinion, for 3 hours a day with yourself in front of a mirror saying, okay, seller, can you sign this listing agreement? No, I need to talk to you about my wife. Okay, shit, next line. Do you not trust me? It doesn't come off authentic, and to me, it just doesn't work that way. And to kind of piggyback on this, I know this is a long answer, but to kind of piggyback on that, I'm super proud to say that about 85 to 90% of our business as a team, not just me as a solo agent, but my team, is repeat and referral business. And I think it speaks volumes, because you have agents that are very successful, but they sit on the phone and cold call all day, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's how you do your business, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's how I got started. But that's not what I wanted. I wanted people that knew they could trust me, and I didn't feel like it was transactional, that I'm always chasing the next deal. I wanted it to feel like, hey, this guy is trusting his family's future or his business future or whatever that might be with me and my team. And now I've got some clients I've done 6 or 7 properties for. I mean, and to me, that's super rewarding, going back to the community service versus I'm just going to stack as much money and call as many people. So,
man, I hope you guys are taking notes, because I love hearing these golden nuggets. Knowledge is your script. I don't know how many times people don't understand that this is a profession. Mm-hmm. It requires education. It requires training. It requires a belief in the product and service that you're selling. Yeah. And I was just talking to other peers, and really, you're a trusted advisor.
Yeah.
And it's so important that people need to understand that, because they get into this business as very transactional, very assuming that it's you're pushing a product, you're pushing. It's a life of servitude. Mm-hmm. I think it is, and that's why it's also it's very challenging at times. Because the good ones put a lot into it. Mm-hmm. They sacrifice a lot, so it's really great to hear that. And you remind me of this line, facts tell, stories sell, and the real professionals are the one who's able to take the facts and create the story around the client, and really help them understand what they want, what their goals are. And I love how you talk about it. The only way to do business is through referrals. Mm-hmm. And that's just an indication of your team's character, of your guys' values. Yeah. And no one really talks about working by referral. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. I think we talked about Brian Buffini and the community there, and everyone probably within the last decade, as technology got better, right? People were paying for leads. People were paying for, obviously, engagements and impressions and, trying to source leads artificially.
Yeah.
And yeah, that is a way to start the business, but at the end of the day, what's exponential is referrals.
Yeah.
And the argument out there is that you can't scale referrals. And that goes back to people's mentality of like they're trying to systematize relationships.
Yeah.
And that's just it's not going to happen,
right.
And
exactly.
And we could get all into debate about that, but I imagine you've dealt with some challenges because just hearing your story, right, from jumping out of planes to was it backdraft, backdraft to being an Italian stallion on TV, being a father, a husband, and you have a team that is separated across the nation because you're talking about South Florida, you're talking about Colorado.
Yeah.
Talk about like maybe one episode of something you had to overcome, or just how do you just overcome? Because in this day and age, with in the military, with the suicide rate, resiliency, and that you need as a business owner, I that's more kind of like what I want to get into is like your strategy in dealing in overcoming challenges.
Yeah. It's a great question in the sense that this is something that's super near and dear to me is, you always see there's like two types of veterans, and same thing with first responder world, because they're really there's a lot of crossover there. Obviously there's some differences, but in terms of the mentality, it's very, very similar. And maybe this is different for you, but my experience has been, leaving the military and leaving the first responder role, there's really like two types of veterans that you run into when you're done with your service. And it's the guys that take what they've learned and they excel, like yourself, you took what you learned in the military, all of the leadership traits and hard work, all those things, and you applied it toward a different aspect. And then you've got guys that they get out and they're lost. They don't know what to do. And they kind of go through life like that, and they live with less than what they should because they don't know how to overcome those challenges. And same thing in the first responder world. A lot of guys, they feel stuck. And I think that like my biggest message to guys out there, guys and girls out there that are in those roles, is at the end of the day, you have to take a look at an inward look at yourself, your emotional strength, your physical strength, all those things are important, but you need to look at what you want your life to look like. And that was a big, big turning point for me because I was very blessed that I ended up running this little rescue unit, and my partner, before I was the one in charge of that unit, was an amazing captain. And I learned a lot of really awesome lessons from him. He was just getting ready to retire, and I had a lot of one-on-one time with him because it was just the two of us. And after talking to him, I would see him, and he was a stud when he was younger. Big guy, lifted a lot of weights, did all these things. But now he had multiple back surgeries. He had a limp. He had all these issues that came with the job. And at the end of the day, a lot of these careers, they're super important. But when you leave those careers, and this I'm gonna be super real and authentic, and when you leave those careers, at the end of the day, you're a number. You know what I mean? And what's going to matter more is in 20 years, how your kids remembered growing up. Were you around? Were you in their life? Or did you just give to an organization that when you leave, they throw you a pizza party and then you're done? Maybe you get a little medal, some trinket that they bought for $20 at the local shop with your name on it. Like those things are great, but you need to figure out how to get past that. So for me, it was just that realization that, hey, listen, I've got two beautiful boys at home and an amazing wife that count on me, right? And in 20 years, they're going to remember what happened right now. My 5-year-old, would cry when I would go to the station because I would, it's a fireman, you're gone for 24 hours, 48 hours, whatever. And he would cry because he never got to see me. And it was that realization that, hey, listen, I'm just a number here. These people, they care about you for the purpose of the job. And don't get me wrong, I've built incredible lifelong friendships, There's guys that I would run into burning buildings without any gear on if they were in trouble. But all in all, at the end of the day, you're a number. And you're not a number to the people that are at home. The people that are relying on you, that your kids, when they wake up in the morning, want you to be there. They want you to be there when they go to bed at night. And that's ultimately what took over for me, was finding that kind of purpose. And it was to serve my kids in the best way possible. And for me, it wasn't spending the next 20 years as a fireman or 25 years or whatever, or in the military, because when you get out, you're broken, you're older, you've missed all that time now, you've got all the mental trauma that comes with it. And some people are great at handling that. Some people, it's an awesome decision, and I commend them for it, more power to them. But for me, it just wasn't the trajectory that I saw my life on. I knew I wanted to be more present for my kids, and I wanted to find a way where real estate, I work way more. There's this kind of stigma that, you're a business owner and then you have all this free time, which we all know is not true. I work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, but I can tailor it a little bit. If my son has a soccer game, I can make sure that I'm not working for that hour and a half period. And that means the world to them. And so to me, that's kind of how I found that purpose and got over a lot of those hurdles.
No, I love it. If you sum what you were saying, what do you want your life to look like? And if you're not living that life, you need to have the courage to make the decision.
Right.
That we need to change it. And I'll tell you, it's scary, right? They're dealing with a challenge. You're like, man, I don't want to keep saying goodbye to my son on these little mini deployments. Mm-hmm. I'm tired of that, but I don't know if I could get another job.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to get the right pay. And it takes courage to make that decision. But you facilitated making that decision by thinking of something that you put in your purpose, and that reminder for you to be like, no, this is bigger. Yep. I need to make the decision. I need to take that courage. It's so important, and that's why it's important in podcasts like this or in communities like this with Duty Honor Real Estate, is really creating that camaraderie that you're not alone. We all have dealt with these situations, and you just need to reach out to one another. So no, I appreciate you talking about that. Now I want to go, I guess, away from the kind of business side. A lot of people they get into business, or they're rising up the ranks or whatever, but the term everyone talks about is like, oh, I need to have work-life balance.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about obviously your family and how you envision you want your family to be. How do you balance? Because I mean, we know that the word balance is just kind of default, but it's really like a harmony.
Yeah. So
how do you deal with that? Anything that you can help the listeners?
Yeah. So when I first got into real estate, most of us come from something, right? So it's very rare that you find somebody that's in real estate that was like 18 years old out of high school and got into real estate. Usually we get into real estate because of the opportunity it presents, time to be with family, more money, freedom, whatever that might look like to that person. So I would say, just look at and sit down and write out, what do you want your life to look like realistically? Not, I want $10 million. Okay, that's not realistic. Like, write down, yeah, me too. Write down what you want your life to look like, and then work backwards from that. So like for me, I wanted more time with my kids. If I decide to go back to firefighting when my kids are grown up, then so be it. But I knew that this was the way that I could get the most money, doing the best I could for people, and also have that time with my kids. So for people that are trying to figure out what that looks like, start from the end and work backwards. And that's the best way to do it. Reverse engineer from where you want to be to where you're at, and then you fill in, what does that look like? And the biggest thing I can say is find mentors, whether that's joining a real estate team, whether that's finding a mentor that works with you one-on-one, a coach, whatever. And it doesn't have to be real estate related. And that's the beauty of real estate and business, is that I've got friends that own barbershops. I've got friends that own restaurants. I've got friends that do all these different styles of business, but the core principles are always the same. They're always the same. And look to those people that are in the positions you want to be at, and go and sit and talk with them. Don't have an ego. Always be a student. And that's something that real estate agents have a hard time with. But I truly believe that that's the best way to get to success. Don't have an ego. Go sit with people that know more than you, and don't try to, puff your chest up and say, oh, look at all my accomplishments. Go there and just be quiet and listen.
No, I love it. I'm big on Excel. I sent you like an Excel sheet of something stupid. But reverse engineering, like there is still a mathematical equation that needs to happen in your decision making. And it's important for people to actually underwrite that decision. They're like, hey, this is what my life should be like. Well, it's going to cost this much. I'm going to have to take away here. It's actually underwriting. And so, I want people to understand it's not something subjective. It's not something like, oh, I don't feel like doing this today.
Yeah.
And I love the mentorship and reminding people to be humble.
Yeah.
It's crazy. You could say the sales industry, but in real estate, it's like we talked about, it's the only industry where you could just make up a persona.
Yep.
And think that you're just some professional. And it's all because of, you could talk about the market and the media and so forth, and just the barriers of entry into the real estate profession. But no, it's so important to get mentors that align with your values, that have similar characteristics or the life you want, right? And just getting a moment of their time could do wonders, and obviously be respectful of their time and so forth. But a lot of people don't want to be humble. They don't want to go and, hey man, I see you doing it.
Yeah.
How do you do it? Can you give me 5 minutes? They don't want to do that because they don't want to expose themselves. Man, I love exposing myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Within reason.
Within reason, right? And I love going and meeting people like you. Right? Yeah. Going and meeting other people in different professions too, because they have different vantage points.
Yeah.
They see the world differently, especially a restaurant owner. Could you imagine? Lana always talks about unreasonable hospitality. And their definition of service to their clients is, is parallels to what we do.
Yeah.
And it's something that you should listen to.
100%.
And I would argue restaurant owners probably have no life.
Yeah.
They're there 24/7.
Yep.
And so again, another example of how important it is to find mentors, especially outside of the industry, and they could teach you their ways of how they balance.
Yeah.
No, that's incredible.
And if I could, I would share just an
yeah.
example of that that's not real estate, business, anything related, but it stuck with me for years. And it was when I was early on in my career down in Pueblo. This guy's amazing fireman. I mean, probably, arguably the best fireman I've ever met in my life. I mean, his vision on tactics and all those things are just unparalleled. And then, he's also the guy that he'll go into a fire for anybody, anywhere, anytime, right? And he happened to be in charge of our tech rescue team, so our technical rescue team. So, if somebody falls off the side of a cliff, the different riggings, or if somebody's trapped under a car, all those types of things. He was the guy that led that, so meaning he's the subject matter expert, right? That comes with a lot, and one of those things is tying knots, different safety knots, harnesses, all those things. And it was so profound to me because I always looked up to this guy as this incredible fireman, but what I really admired about him was his leadership ability, because there was another guy on the department that was a part of the tech rescue team, but obviously not in charge of it. But he had this just uncanny skill to do knots. He was really good at them. He could do them really fast. And obviously in a life-saving situation, that's what you want. And this guy, having all this experience, the tech rescue leader, the guy that was in charge of it, says, hey, anytime that I'm on scene with this guy and we need that aspect, I am going to refer to him. I'm going to pivot and he's going to run that portion of it. And I thought that was just so incredible, because you see guys with these huge egos that they would risk something like that so that they could stay in that position, that leadership role. He didn't care if it, looked poorly on him. His mind was, this guy is better at this particular thing, so I'm going to learn from him and I'm going to let him run that. And that has stuck with me for years. So.
No, love it. No, thank you for that reminder, right?
Yeah.
Teamwork, Makes the dream work, right? So we've talked a lot about different things, but I think people need to understand like the future of real estate. You know, there's a lot in the headlines. There's a lot of propaganda.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reactionary things that are happening.
Yeah.
There's, supply and demand, real estate's hyper local, like what you said, what's happening in Colorado is not really happening in South Florida. Where do you see, like, if some guy came to you, what comes to mind? Like, hey, Tristan, how's the real estate market?
Yeah. Yeah.
Am I going to be able to buy a house, or like what should I do? Like
Yeah.
just some open-ended questions.
Yeah, I would tell somebody, and I have these conversations with people every day, right? I mean, that's part of our job as a real professional is the education portion. And at the end of the day, real estate's cyclical. I mean, look at historic trends. It's always ups, downs, lefts, rights, right? But at the end of the day, everybody needs a house, right? There's different paths to get to that end point, and everybody's looks a little bit different. There's all kinds of programs out there, whether you're a VA buyer, whether you're a first-time home buyer. There's, like in Colorado, we have CHAFA, down payment assistance programs, all these types of things that can help people get there. Real estate is never going to go away. It's just one of those fundamental things that you're always going to need. People are always going to need you to help them find houses, to help them sell houses. As far as where the market is going, it really, and if it's a benefit to that person, like I said earlier, it really just depends on their situation. If somebody is, a VA buyer, for example, their entry into that house is going to look far different than somebody that, just wants to buy a house, right? The barriers of entry are a little bit different there in terms of, for example, the VA, of course, you don't have to put down a down payment if you don't want to. You only have to do, like your closing costs, and there's differences in appraisals and all those types of things. So there's a solution for everybody. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of trial and error and learning from somebody that knows what they're doing and how to direct you and doing it the proper way to actually make those end goals happen.
Yeah, I concur. Demand, it's always going to be there.
Yeah.
People need a place to live,
Yeah.
right? Even whether it's leasing, buying, investing, there's always a demand. I can't agree with you more, right? There's barriers of entry. People just, not people, but like we all need to understand there is a way to get there, but you're going to have to go through the barriers of entry, at your time and space. Because when we bought our first house, we were a different time and space, and it was a different barrier of entry. Mm-hmm. And then when you go to a next chapter in your life, and it's time to upgrade or downsize or whatever, there's different barriers of entry there. Yeah. And understanding that how. But I think one thing you mentioned was just having patience. Yeah. That there is a way to get there. Don't get frustrated. It may not be the right time now. It could be next quarter. It could be next year. So no, that's a great reminder.
And avoiding the mainstream media, right? Come on, how many times do we see on TV something that's totally inaccurate? And it depends on, nowadays, everything is so political. I mean, you can't make a social media post or say anything without one side interpreting it as something different or the other side. So you have to cut out all the noise. You have to cut out the noise because otherwise it's doom and gloom all the time. And, that's one of the main reasons why just talk to somebody, whether it's a lender, an agent, just talk to somebody. Because if you just look on TV, if you watch CNN or Fox News, you could put them on at the exact same time and they're going to tell you two different stories.
That's right.
And so it's super important that you talk to somebody that knows what they're doing in the industry.
I love it. Now, we always like to give just a little bit of time. Do you have any final thoughts, to our audience, to the world? Anything you wanted to say, didn't get a chance to?
Just want to reemphasize that we live in the United States, right? This is a land of opportunity. The American dream is still 100% possible and probable, and you can get there, right? When you cut out all that noise. Whether you want to start a business, doesn't have to be real estate. You could be an entrepreneur of some other sort, or if you're the guy that bags groceries at the grocery store, as long as you love what you're doing, then you've made it, right? We are so conditioned nowadays in the United States. It's a wonderful place to raise a family, and it's a great place to build money and an empire and all these things. But it's also a great place to just enjoy your life. And there's so many people that we get so consumed by more. Like, to give you an example, like with my real estate business, my end goal was to have more time with my family. So I set my goals at the end of the year for the following year, financial goals, volume goals, all those types of things. And when I get to that number, I'm not like a lot of these other agents that are like, oh man, I got to that number 6 months early, let's double down and really crush it, right? That's just not me. And it's not to take away from anybody that does that, but for me, I have to remind myself, what was my big why, right? And mine was to spend more time with my family. So if I reach that goal in 8 months, I'm still going to work, don't get me wrong, but I'm not going to be, full throttle and miss opportunities. I'm going to use my time now with my kids. And so I guess my closing thing is there's a difference in being rich and being wealthy. And I read that, I can't remember where I read this, but it stuck with me for years. But rich people, right? When you're rich, you spend your time to earn money, okay? When you're wealthy, you spend your money to earn back that time. And that's always stuck with me. That's always in the back of my head. So once I get to my goals, now I'm going to use that time that I have now afforded myself. I've now earned that extra month or that extra 2 months that I get to spend even more time with my kids, and I get to be the father that I didn't have, right? So I would just leave it like that. For the people out there that end up watching this, don't feel like you need to mirror somebody else's life. If you're happy, be the best that you can at what you're doing, and just find a way to be happy, whether that's switching careers, whether that's finding a new activity, whatever it is. There's so many possibilities out there, and just don't feel like you're stuck in this little box.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on, man.
Oh, we'll catch you guys on the next episode, but this was an amazing one. See ya.